Carter was just a simple human scavenger. Flying alone through the edge of forgotten space, he wasn't rich, and he didn't have a big ship. Only a small cargo hauler with old engines and one working blaster. He searched dead moons and broken stations for anything he could sell, parts, sometimes fuel. One day, he landed on a cold, gray moon that didn't even have a name, just a number in some ancient database. He didn't expect to find anything there, just more rusted junk and silence. But then he heard a sound, a small sound, like something scratching metal. Or maybe breathing. He followed it slowly, one hand on his old blaster, walking through a broken storage building. Behind a pile of broken crates, he found a strange pod, small and covered in dust, and inside that pod was a child. She was tiny, with silver-blue skin and big eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. Her hair was long and tangled, and her clothes were torn and too small for her. She looked up at Carter with fear, not moving, not speaking, for a moment. Carter didn't know what to do. Then the girl slowly reached out her hand and showed him something. It was a necklace metal, smooth, and shaped like a star wrapped in a ring. Carter had seen that symbol before, in old records from the Galactic archives. It belonged to a royal family, one that had disappeared many years ago during a great rebellion. He stared at the necklace, then looked at the girl. She couldn't be. Could she? The girl tried to speak, but no words came out, only soft clicks and strange sounds. She was scared, hungry, and very weak. Carter knelt down and offered her a food bar. She took it slowly and started eating like she hadn't tasted food in weeks, maybe longer. She kept her eyes on him the whole time, not sure if he was safe, but not running either. Carter made a quick decision. He couldn't leave her here, and he couldn't report her not yet if she really was from a lost royal family. Others might want to capture her, sell her, or use her for war. He didn't know why she was here, or how she survived, but he knew she needed help. He gently lifted her into his arms, and she didn't fight. She was light as a feather and cold like stone. He wrapped her in his jacket and walked back to his ship as they flew away from the moon. Carter saw movement on the surface. Someone else had landed there too late, but still dangerous. Carter checked his sensors and cursed softly. Bounty hunters. They must have been tracking the same old records. Maybe they knew about the girl, too. He turned off his ship's beacon and flew into a nearby asteroid field to hide. The girl stayed quiet, sitting beside him in the cockpit. She didn't cry, didn't speak, but held the necklace tightly in her small hands. Carter glanced at her and said gently, "I don't know who you are, kid, but I think you're important." She looked up at him with those glowing eyes. Then she reached out and touched his hand. Just once, softly, like saying thank you without words. Carter didn't know what would happen next. He didn't know where to go or who to trust, but deep in his heart, he made a promise. He would protect this child no matter what, and far across the galaxy. In a golden palace that touched the clouds, a mother opened her eyes in the middle of the night. Her heart beat faster, and she looked up at the stars. She didn't know why, but she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. She whispered into the night, "My daughter." Queen Zaraya stood alone on the wide balcony of her golden palace. The wind blew softly through her long silver robes as she looked out at the stars. It was quiet, too quiet for a palace meant to hold joy, laughter, and the voice of a child. But those sounds had disappeared long ago, since the day her daughter vanished. The queen had never smiled the same way again. Years ago, a rebel attack destroyed one of her royal ships during a diplomatic trip. The explosion broke the ship apart and scattered the crew across the nearby moons. The queen had been told her daughter, just a baby, then was gone, but no body was ever found. No remains, no proof, only silence and ashes. Everyone around her said it was time to accept the truth. The High Council begged her to declare the child dead so the throne could move forward. But Queen Zaraya refused. Every morning she stood in the same place, hoping to feel something, anything, and every year. On the same date, she sent ships into the stars to search. The nobles whispered behind her back. They said the queen was mad, lost in the past, but she didn't care what they said. She was a mother before she was a ruler, and deep in her soul, she knew her daughter was still out there in her private chambers. The queen kept a holly mage of her child, the last one taken before the attack. A small girl with glowing eyes and soft blue skin, reaching for her mother with a bright smile. She would be older now, stronger perhaps, or maybe weaker from the years alone. But the queen believed her heart would recognize her child, no matter how many cycles passed that night. The queen spoke to her advisors again. "We must keep looking," she said softly. "I don't care how far or how dangerous, she's still out there." One of the ministers, an older man with cold eyes, replied, "My queen, the empire is crumbling. The people are losing hope. They need a clear air, not a lost memory." But the queen looked him in the eye and said, "What they need is truth behind the walls of the palace." Not everyone was loyal. Some feared the return of the child. If the rightful heir came back, it would destroy many secret plans. There were rebels hiding even inside the capital, quiet, watching, waiting. They wanted power, and the queen's broken heart gave them an advantage. But things changed. When a signal reached the palace archives, it was weak, broken, coming from a scavenger ship near the outer moons. The AI picked it up and activated an old alert one, only triggered by a special symbol. The symbol of the lost royal child. The star and ring. The necklace only one person was known to wear. The queen was in the middle of a meeting when the alert chimed. At first, she thought it was just another false hope. But when she saw the image, her hands trembled. The signal carried a visual brief and blurry, but she saw the necklace. And next to it, the soft blue hand of a child. Her voice broke when she said, "Prepare the fleet." The council objected, shouted, and tried to stop her, but she had already left the chamber. Her mind clear for the first time in years. She's alive. The queen whispered to herself again and again, "She's alive." The palace came alive with movement. Ships were readied, guards armed, and diplomats summoned. This was no ordinary mission. It was a royal retrieval, an operation to bring home the future of the empire. And with it, hope. But in the shadows, a figure watched the queen from afar. He turned and disappeared down a hidden corridor. If the child returned, their plans would fail. He sent a coded message to someone deep in the rebel systems. "Target has been located," it said. "Stop the human before he reaches the queen." Back in her private room, the queen sat on her bed, holding the old holly mage again. She touched the screen gently, her eyes full of tears. "My little star," she whispered. "Hold on just a little longer. Your mother is coming." Carter flew through the black silence of space, his hands tight on the controls. The girl sat beside him in the co-pilot seat, small and quiet, wrapped in a blanket. Her eyes watched the stars, but her body stayed still, as if she was waiting for something to go wrong. Carter didn't speak much, but he kept glancing at her. Wondering who she really was, she hadn't spoken a single word. Yet there was something in her presence, something royal, something important. The necklace around her neck glowed faintly, the strange symbol of a star wrapped in a ring. Carter had seen symbols like it before, in old ruins and lost files, but he never expected to find a real living child wearing one. She was more than just a lost kid. She was connected to a forgotten empire, and now he realized he wasn't the only one looking for her. A warning light blinked on the screen. Carter cursed under his breath and tapped the console. 3 ships had just dropped out of warp, behind him, small, fast, and armed. Bounty hunters, they had tracked him. Maybe through his ship's old systems. Maybe through something worse. He turned to the girl. "We're not safe," he said gently. "You trust me." She didn't answer with words, just nodded slowly and gripped the necklace tighter. Carter hit the throttle, and the ship dove into a nearby asteroid belt. Lasers fired behind them, lighting up the dark rocks. The girl gasped and covered her ears, but she didn't cry. The chase was fast and dangerous. Carter twisted through the rocks, using every trick he knew. But the bounty hunters were experienced. And they didn't give up easily. One of their ships clipped his engine. Sparks flying across his control panel. Smoke filled the cabin, and alarms screamed. Carter growled and flipped a hidden switch. A pulse burst from his ship, releasing false signals and scattered energy waves. The bounty hunters paused for a second. Confused by the sudden interference, it was just enough time. Carter turned sharply and escaped into a narrow cave inside a huge asteroid. Inside the cave, everything was dark and cold. Carter powered down the ship, hiding its signal completely. He reached over and wiped the girl's face gently. Brushing away soot and dust, she was shaking. But she still didn't cry. She was stronger. Then she looked. "We're safe for now," Carter whispered, trying to believe it himself. He opened a small panel and pulled out an old transmitter. It was ancient but powerful, connected to pre-war frequencies. He looked at the necklace again, then sent a short signal using the symbol encoded within it, a simple message: "Found survivor. Royal crest confirmed." Awaiting reply, the girl watched him, confused but curious. Then she did something unexpected. She drew a circle in the dust on the floor. Inside the circle, she placed a small stone she had hidden in her sleeve. Carter looked at it closely. Wasn't just a stone, it was a data crystal, encoded and sealed in royal metal. He carefully scanned it, using his ship's reader. Files unlocked slowly, showing old images of a royal family. And there she was, younger, smiling, in the arms of a tall alien woman in royal armor. The Queen. Carter leaned back, stunned. This girl really was the missing princess, the lost heir. He looked at her again, and for the first time, she smiled. It was small and shy, but real. In that moment, Carter felt something shift in his heart. He wasn't just a scavenger anymore. He was carrying the future of a people, far away. The message Carter's sent reached the royal citadel. The palace AI lit up. Alerts flashing, the Queen was alerted immediately. And her hands trembled as she read the signal. The symbol was real, the coordinates were near. She ordered her fleet to move out at once, ignoring the protests of the council. But others were watching too. Deep in a rebel base, someone intercepted the same signal. They decoded the location, and their leader slammed his fist on the table. "She's alive," he hissed, "and the human has her." He sent out a new order to all rebel agents in the sector: intercept and capture the child. Before the Queen does, in the cave, Carter looked at the girl and whispered, "I don't know what's coming, but I'll protect you." The girl reached out and took his hand again. No words were needed. They were a team now. And the galaxy was about to change because of it. The citadel of Lysera had not seen this kind of movement in years. It had once been the heart of an empire, full of songs, laughter, and light. But since the Queen's daughter vanished, the halls had become too quiet. The Queen still ruled. But she ruled with sadness in her eyes. Now, after so long, something had changed. A signal had arrived, short, broken, but unmistakable. The crest of the royal family had been detected. Encoded inside a human message, the Queen stood in her throne room, her hands shaking as she stared at the glowing screen. An old servant whispered, "My Queen." "The code is real." She did not blink, only whispered back, "Then my daughter lives." The High Council was called at once. They argued, as always, with their long robes and empty words. The source is unconfirmed. One barked, "This could be a trap," said another. But the queen raised her hand, and silence followed. "I have waited years for even a whisper," she said quietly. "I will not ignore the cry of my own child." The councilman with narrow eyes stepped forward. "But what if this is bait from rebels? A trick to draw out the fleet?" Soraya's voice was calm but firm. "Then I will face that trick myself." She walked out before they could stop her. Her personal guard followed, golden armor shining under the moons. The queen moved like someone reborn, her pain still there but no longer holding her down. In the control room, she gave a single command: "Prepare the Sovereign Star. We leave at once." The Sovereign Star was no ordinary vessel. It was a royal flagship, silent for decades, but still deadly. Its engines came to life like the roar of an old beast. The people gathered as the queen boarded, some cheering, some watching in shock. Many had believed the queen had given up, but now they saw fire in her eyes once again. Far below the city, in the shadows, others watched too. A rebel informant heard the launch orders and quickly sent a message: "She's going after the child." The message read, "The air is alive." The reply came within moments, cold and direct: "Intercept them. Do not allow the child to return." The rebels feared what the child represented. With the queen weakened and the line of power uncertain, many had taken control of outer colonies. If the princess returned, the people would rally again. The rebels would lose everything. They had to stop it before it began. Back aboard the Sovereign Star, the queen stood before her crew. "Many of you were not yet born when my daughter disappeared," she said, "but I believe she lives, and a human has helped her survive. This mission is not about war, it is about bringing her home." The crew nodded, touched by her words. Loyalty filled the ship like light returning after a long night across the stars. Carter was preparing to. He had repaired the damage to his ship as best as he could. The girl still sat quietly, but she seemed calmer now. She was drawing pictures on a small Ptah palace, a tall woman, a symbol of the necklace. She hadn't said a word, but her drawing spoke louder than any voice. Suddenly, Carter's scanner beeped. A royal ship was approaching, huge, beautiful, and glowing with gold. He didn't know whether to be afraid or relieved. Then a second alert hit the screen. Another ship, smaller, darker, moving fast. Rebels? He clenched his jaw, knowing they would arrive first unless he moved. He turned to the girl. "We've got trouble coming," he said. She looked at him, and for the first time, her mouth moved. "Mother," she whispered, voice soft and trembling. Carter froze, his eyes wide. It was the first word she had spoken. It was real. All of it. He was carrying royalty, and now he had to make sure she made it back safely, no matter what waited for them in the dark. The queen's ship entered the system minutes later. Her heart pounded in her chest as she saw the bounty hunter marks on nearby wreckage. Her daughter was near, but so was danger. The time for silence was over. The queen's voice echoed through her ship. "Prepare to bring my daughter home." Carter stared at the two signals on his screen. One came from the massive golden ship, the queen's flagship, shining like a star. The other came from a dark vessel moving fast, its weapons hot and ready. The rebels had arrived first. They weren't here to talk, they were here to take. He turned to the girl sitting quietly beside him. She held the data crystal in her lap and clutched her necklace like it was her only safety. "You hear me?" he said softly. "You don't let go of that thing, no matter what." She nodded slowly, then looked out the window at the stars. Her tiny hand reached out and touched Carter's wrist. It was her way of saying she trusted him. Carter's ship was not built for battle. It was a hauler, slow and weak, but he knew how to fly it like a shadow in the dark. He pulled the ship into a wide loop. Pretending to flee, The rebel vessel followed, hungry and confident as they chased him into a rocky gas belt. Carter activated the rear boosters and dropped fake cargo. The rocks exploded in the gas cloud. Shaking the rebel ship's sensors, he used the moment to dive down. Disappearing under a thick asteroid, the girl held on tight, her eyes wide but calm. Carter looked at her and smiled. "You've got steel in your heart, kid." The Queen's ship finally entered the system. Her crew tracked the chase and saw the signals. The commander said, "Rebels are closing in. Shall we engage?" But the Queen raised her hand. "Not yet," she said. "Wait for the humans' move." She didn't want to risk a stray shot hitting the child. Not after all these years. In the rebel ship, the commander barked orders. Force him to land. Take the girl alive. Kill the human if you must. They fired again, lasers slicing through space. One of them cutting through Carter's wing. The ship shook hard, warning lights flashing everywhere. Carter winced. "Hold together. Girl, just a little more." The girl leaned forward, opened her small hand, and showed Carter something new. It was a second crystal, smaller, glowing softly. When Carter connected it to the ship's system, a new route appeared, one that led to a royal beacon hidden behind the belt. A secret path only the royal family would know. The girl had trusted him with it. He followed the new path, dodging rocks and enemy fire. The rebel ship struggled to keep up, confused by the route. Suddenly, Carter's ship burst out into open space, right in front of the Queen's flagship. The golden vessel lit up, and a calm voice came over the speaker. "This is Sovereign Star. Identify yourself." Carter leaned close to the mic, his voice rough but steady. "This is Captain Carter. I've got someone you've been looking for." He paused, then added, "I didn't take her. She found me, and I protected her." The Queen's voice came through next, soft but filled with strength. "Is she safe?" Carter looked at the girl, who gave him a small nod. "Yes," he replied. "She's safe with me." But the rebel ship wasn't done. They fired one final shot, aiming not at Carter, but at the Queen's vessel. It was an act of madness. But before the laser hit, Carter's ship spun into its path. The blast struck him instead. Ripping through the side of his hull, the girl screamed her first real sound of fear. Carter coughed hard, blood in his mouth, alarms everywhere, but the Queen's ship moved fast, pulling Carter's vessel into its bay with tractor beams. Medical crews rushed in as the girl held Carter's hand tight. She didn't want to let go. The Queen stepped into the bay, her long robes trailing behind her. She stopped when she saw the girl, dirty, hurt, but alive, and the girl looked up, tears in her glowing eyes. "Ma," she whispered again. The Queen fell to her knees, wrapping her arms around her daughter. For a moment, there were no guards, no empires, no rules, only a mother and her child. Together again, behind them, Carter lay on a stretcher. Smiling weakly, he had kept his promise. Before he passed out, he whispered, "She's home now." The palace halls echoed with footsteps as Queen Zaraya walked slowly. Her arms were wrapped around the child she had lost so many years ago. The girl clung to her mother's dress, silent, eyes wide at the lights and guards. The Queen's face was wet with tears, but her chin was high. She walked with pride, with love, and with something else. Peace. The royal doctors had checked the child. She was weak but healthy, scared but brave. They said it was a miracle she had survived. The Queen only smiled softly and whispered, "She survived because her heart is strong," but her thoughts kept drifting back to the human. Carter was still unconscious, lying in the medical bay. His body had taken the full force of the rebel blast. Wounds covered his side, and machines kept him alive. The Queen visited him in secret, placing her hand on his shoulder. "You protected my daughter," she whispered. "You protected our future." The news spread across the empire like a storm. The lost princess had been found, returned by a human who risked everything. Cities lit their towers in gold. Temples rang their bells. Children wore copies of the royal necklace. For the first time in years, the people had something to believe in again. The rebels tried to deny it, calling it a lie, a trick. But then a message was broadcast from the Queen herself. She stood beside her daughter, who held Carter's old flight jacket in her arms. "She has returned," the Queen said, "and with her, the one who gave her hope." The people roared. With joy, inside the palace, servants cleaned rooms that had been empty for a decade. The old nursery was filled again with soft lights and warm colors. The princess whose name was Ayara started to smile more. She didn't speak much, but she began to hum. Her favorite song was one her mother used to sing before bedtime. The Queen never left her side. Every morning, she braided Ayari's hair and helped her dress. Every evening, she read old stories aloud. Sometimes, Ayari would draw pictures of Carter, his ship, his coat, his smile. She missed him, and so did the Queen. Then, one quiet night, a nurse rushed into the Queen's chamber. "The human," she said breathlessly. "He's awake." The Queen didn't speak. She only stood and walked quickly to the medical wing. When she entered the room, Carter was sitting up weakly, blinking. At the ceiling, the Queen placed a hand on his arm and said softly, "Thank you." Carter smiled a little. She made it back. The Queen nodded, her voice shaking. "She's safe, because of you." Carter looked down. "I didn't do it for rewards, I know," she said. "That's why it matters." Later that day, Kari walked into the room. She wore a simple white robe and had a flower in her hair. When Carter saw her, he smiled wide. "Hey, Star Girl," he said gently. She ran to him and hugged him tightly, her small arms around his chest. The Queen watched with tears in her eyes. She had never imagined her daughter would return with a protector, a friend, a father figure. And yet, here they were. A broken family, now healing, a missing piece. Now whole again, the Empire declared. A week of celebration, flags flew high, and ships lit the sky with colors. But inside the palace, the Queen gave a private announcement. She named Carter as guardian of the royal line, title never before given to an outsider, especially not a human, some protested. But the Queen stood firm. This man gave everything. "Without asking for anything," she said, "he will stand beside my daughter until she takes the crown." Carter, still in a healing robe, tried to argue. But Ayari held his hand and whispered, "Please stay." And so, he stayed. In the weeks that followed, Carter walked the palace grounds with Ayari by his side. She taught him some of her words, and he taught her old Earth songs. They laughed under the twin moons and watched stars from the high tower. He had come to this world alone, a man with no purpose, but now he had something to protect, something to love. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the citadel walls, the Queen stood beside Carter on the balcony. The stars above were the same ones she had stared at all those lonely years, but now they looked brighter. She turned to him and said, "You carried her back to me, Carter, but you also carried back hope." The palace no longer felt cold or silent. Laughter returned to its golden halls, and music flowed from its towers. The people bowed with joy when they saw their young princess walk with her head held high. By her side walked the human who had once been a stranger, but now, too many, he was something more. Carter didn't wear armor or robes. He still wore simple clothes and his patched-up flight jacket. But wherever he walked, guards stood taller, and servants smiled brighter. He was not royal by blood, but he had earned their respect in a way no title could give. And most of all, he had Ayari's trust. Every morning, Ayari met him in the garden. She brought flowers, drawings, and sometimes questions. "What is Earth like?" she once asked, her head tilted with curiosity. Carter smiled. big skies, loud cities, and people who don't give up. She nodded and whispered, "Like you." The queen watched from the balcony, her heart full. Her daughter had returned to her, but with her came something unexpected, a man who had filled the emptiness of all those silent years. She found herself talking to Carter more often, asking for his advice. He spoke plainly, but always from the heart. One night, the queen invited him to her private chamber. They sat by the fire while Ayari slept. "I used to look at the stars and feel nothing," she said quietly, "but now, when I look at them, I feel like I'm not alone." Carter didn't speak, but he nodded slowly. She looked at him then and asked, "Why did you save her when you had nothing to gain?" He took a deep breath. "Because I saw someone small, scared and left behind," he said. "I've been all those things, and no one ever came for me, but she. She deserved better." The queen's eyes softened. "You gave her better," she whispered. Then she asked a question that surprised even herself. "Will you stay? Not just as her guardian, but as part of our family?" Carter didn't answer right away. He looked out the window at the stars. For years, he had drifted from place to place. No home, no name people remembered. But now, there was a child who waited for him every morning, and a queen who looked at him not with power, but with kindness. "I'll stay," he said at last, and the queen smiled not as a ruler, but as a mother. News spread again across the empire. The guardian had accepted his place. Rebel forces weakened, seeing the people unite under love instead of fear. Colonies once lost returned their loyalty. Peace began to grow, slowly but surely. In time, Ayari began speaking more. She told stories about her time with Carter, how he had fed her, protected her, and never shouted. She told everyone that he was brave and that his heart was made of light. The people listened, and they believed, not just because she was a princess, but because she spoke with truth. Carter never claimed to be a hero. He still fixed things with his hands and helped the staff carry heavy crates. But when Ayari had nightmares, he was the first to hold her hand when the queen felt doubt. He was the one who reminded her what mattered. Not crowns, not gold, but love. One morning during a royal festival, Ayari stood before the crowd. She wore a new dress, her mother's crest glowing at her chest. Carter stood behind her, hands folded, silent but proud. Ayari raised her voice and said, "I was alone, but then I found someone who made me feel safe. He had no crown, no army, and no home," she said. "But he gave me everything I needed: warmth, care, and hope." She turned to Carter, "And now, I give him something too." She stepped forward and placed a golden ring around his wrist. "It's a mark of family," she said, "and he is mine." The crowd cheered, and the queen wiped her eyes. There, in front of all, stood a girl who had once been forgotten, a man who had once been lost, and a mother who had once given up on joy. Together, they had created something stronger than blood, something real, something whole. Not just a royal family, but a true one. As the stars blinked high above, Carter looked down at Ayari and then at the queen. He didn't speak, but he didn't need to, because now he finally understood. He had found something more powerful than any throne. He had found what it truly meant to be home.